I first started noticing firearms as a kid, this thing fascinated me. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This tall fella standing next to me is an 1816 Harper's Ferry musket. This one, however, was manufactured in 1819, and I must tell you, it was my first introduction to collectible firearms because this is actually a family heirloom. Over the course of its manufacture run, there would be almost 700,000 of these rifles produced. Because this one was made in 1819, it's what's known as a Type 1. And because it has some very unique characteristics. The first one is that it was never converted over to percussion caps, and a lot of these were. They would see action all through U.S. history from, obviously, 1816, and believe it or not, into the early days of the American Civil War. For whatever reason, when you were converting one from flintlock to percussion cap, the Type 1s were deemed too outdated to make the conversion. Most of these you would find have been converted, and one of the interesting things about the rifle is, at least in my mind, was how long it served the United States military. Almost 40 years. Some of its predecessors wouldn't hang around near that long. The Industrial Revolution saw that in the invention of new gun-making techniques, every 8 or 10 years, the latest and greatest thing would come out, so the production runs were much, much shorter. The War of 1812 exposed some major problems with American service rifles. This one replaced the 1812, which was sort of a knockoff of the French 1777 Charleville rifle. One of the major differences between this and the 1812 was the bayonet was lengthened, and the lock plate was also lengthened, presumably for strength. Earlier in the video, I showed this one with the bayonet that still works, and we'll get close-ups of not only the Harper's Ferry marking with the date of 1819, and of course the eagle, but also the VP marks over the top of an eagle, which of course stood for verified and proofed. This rifle fires a 69 caliber lead round ball. That's 410 grains, almost 1 ounce of shot. Believe me, I wouldn't want to get hit with this thing if somebody threw it at me, let alone if it was shot out of a gun. It's a very impressive piece of equipment. A word on the sights of this gun needs to be talked about while we're discussing the caliber. You have no rear, and there never was one. Up here, around the end of the muzzle band, you sort of have a cast front sight post or blade. It's interesting the way the thought process worked for this type of rifle. At the time, based on what was happening on the European continent, you didn't need precision rifle fire. That's not how the generals and war strategists thought. You were just going to take this, try to hold your nerve, and fire it into a mass of enemy soldiers, sort of aligning themselves in the English square. You didn't really need accurate rifle fire for a couple of other reasons that I think it's worth discussing. The first one is the battlefield medicine and medicine at the time was absolutely horrible. If you managed to be hit with this in the shin, in the thigh, it's quite likely that you would die. One, as soon as this guy, moving this speed that it was fired at, hits substantial bone, it shatters. It doesn't chip off, it doesn't deflect off, and it certainly doesn't drill a hole in it. It absolutely shatters it like a pane of glass. Whether you lived or died from one of those wounds was immaterial because you would never again be listed as a combat effective. Their goal was to take you off the battlefield for life, and any sort of meaningful contact with this accomplished that goal. And because there was very little medicine around for pain control, it would be very unlikely that you would be able to fight immediately after being wounded anyway. Another odd thing about battlefield medicine and this type of ball, what happens is it's moving at the perfect speed to drag all of your body filth, bacteria, all of the dirt and bacteria on your clothes into the wound cavity, causing you almost assuredly a case of infection or sepsis, which they had no medicine to combat, and what followed was a slow and agonizing death. I apologize for using the term rifle and musket interchangeably, but perhaps that's a happy accident, according to Bob Ross anyway. You see, the deal was, smoothbore don't foul up near as much as a rifled musket. The reason is, there's more space in here. In fact, some of the balls were actually cast to 65 caliber so they would be looser in the barrel and you could shoot them more. The rate of fire depended on the individual skill set of the soldier, but you could figure perhaps 2 to 3 rounds per minute. War strategists at the time preferred this because you could shoot it more, say, than a rifle with the riflings down the barrel, which would foul much sooner. Those Kentucky rifle types of designs were great on the American frontier for varmint and mid-sized game, but it would be very, very inconvenient to have to stop every 2 or 3 shots in the middle of a battle to clean your rifle. You can also see by the weapon's design, it had a 49-inch barrel, and with the bayonet on, I'm almost exactly 6 foot. It looks like it's about 6'1", 6'2". This was actually used, believe it or not, to keep people away from you. It has a long reach and it really functions more like a spear if you don't have your musket loaded or you've run out of shot. Once again, having that much steel run through your belly in the mid-1800s almost assuredly was going to send you to the graveyard. Now, the history of it is really interesting towards the end of its life. Most of the muskets that you would find that were converted actually saw action in the very early days of the American Civil War. Most of the muskets, for whatever reason, seem to be lying around Southern arsenals. So believe it or not, in the first year or so of the war, you would find soldiers of the Confederate States of America marching endless miles holding on to this thing. And I can tell you, from the time I got it out of my truck to where we're filming is a couple of 100 yards, I seriously wanted to set this thing down. This is no fun. Approximately 12 pounds with the bayonet on. As I mentioned, this is a family heirloom. It's a wall hanger to me, and so when I first started noticing firearms as a kid, this thing fascinated me. As it turns out, collectors still seem to enjoy them, especially the ones that haven't been converted. It's really kind of vacuous how much it would be worth because it's all about what somebody is willing to pay. The book value on these muskets can be anywhere from $700 to $2,000, so not a tremendous amount of money. And it's unknown to me how much one of these complete kits would go for if you found the right buyer. One thing, however, I suspect is that it doesn't really have much of a value to a reenactor unless you happen to be a reenactor for the Mexican-American War. This came after the War of 1812, and this version wasn't used in the Civil War very much. So, is to say at all, because they would be converted. So, it's kind of a niche market, even though it seems to be fully intact. There are 2 numbers on the bayonet, and there's a letter B, and underneath it, it says 30. I can't find any correlation between the markings on the bayonet and the ones on the musket. I don't even know if they match things out like that, and that's completely unknown to me. But if somebody knows, don't be afraid to leave me a comment, because I would love to find out whether or not this is actually original from the date of manufacture. While serving in the Marine Corps, I was in the infantry, an 0311. So infantry rifles and infantry muskets have always had a special place in my heart. I hope they do for you as well. This is kind of a cool little family heirloom. And if you have some laying around your house, send us pictures. I would love to put them on the channel. Thank you, and don't be afraid to like and subscribe.